Hi everyone, today I want to show you the best strategy to level 1 to 100 in Diablo 4 Season 1. A lot of things have changed since launch, so you might have seen my old video where I talked about the 1 to 100 progression, and well, now that the World First Race is over, I decided to take some time and talk about it. So a few things have changed lately. Notably, Nightmare Dungeons have been massively buffed. They get plus 80% experience now, multiplicatively, so they are by far the best source of experience in the endgame, and basically the main activity you want to do. In addition to that, Hell Tides have been nerfed, so they have been made harder to farm, more difficult, and also you don't need to farm them anymore for Forgotten Souls. So you can completely skip Hell Tides altogether, and they're kind of like a useless system when it comes to leveling. So you just get less XP, you get a decent amount of loot there, but that's about it. Then there are also the Whispers that have been buffed lately, so they are a bit of an option, especially in the early game, but also not really enough. So the only realistic option to level fast are Nightmare Dungeons. But there are also some details here that I should go into. Now, when it comes to starting out in the season, there's another strategy, which is the Strongholds. So you might have seen some talk about that, and some people are doing that for the World First Race, for example. I, in fact, did not do that. I just farmed Renown, and I would suggest everyone exactly the same. I think it makes no sense to skip Renown just to do it later. You'd lose out on the 20 Paragon points, and 20 Paragon points are quite significant. Even on rather powerful builds, you can feel the impact of those Paragon points. You are simply stronger, you can go faster, the game is easier, and that is something that is just great for everyone, in my opinion. So you may lose a few hours on your way 1 to 50, but if you do the Renown instead of the Stronghold strategy, you will feel the impact of those Paragon points. So in this World First Race, I was significantly slower to reach level 50 because I spent so much time not farming the juicy Temple of Rod Stronghold, but instead going all around everywhere. I also still had to collect my altars, and well, once I had everything done, once I had my Renown, I was just able to overtake everyone towards the end by quite a margin. Because this grind 1 to 50 is a very small part compared to the remaining grind 50 to 100, where you just go Nightmare Dungeons. Then comes also the question, when do you actually want to enter the higher difficulties? So in my case, I did it at level 46 for Nightmare and level 64 for Torment. So you can do that a bit later or a bit earlier. That depends a bit on how well your build is going, what exactly you're playing, how well you are playing. So if you have a really powerful build, you can do it quite early, but I would not suggest to go before that level really. So there's not really a point to like struggling away at level 40 and then going into Nightmare difficulty, and then you fight monsters that are 15 levels above you. You don't even get like the full XP bonus anymore because of the experience changes lately, so I'm gonna go with that in a second. But the point is, you don't want to slow down too much and struggle too hard when you go to the next difficulty. And especially switching from Nightmare to Torment difficulty when you're already doing Nightmare Dungeons, you might have to do like a significant tier skip. So for example, you farm like, let's say tier 10, tier 12 Nightmare Dungeons or so, where you have like 2 affixes and it's pretty easy. And then you go to Torment and they start at minimum tier 21 and have 4 affixes, and all those affixes are beefed up in Torment as well. You can feel quite a difference. So if you suddenly go from like, let's say 4 minutes per dungeon to like 9 minutes per dungeon or so because you have to play so slow and carefully, that is absolutely not worth it. You want to make sure that when you go to the next difficulty, you can still kind of farm at the same speed or maybe slightly slower. And if you cannot do that, you want to just grind up more levels and then go later. In general, keeping your pace high is always the best strategy. So this game strongly incentivizes you to go fast, and it doesn't really incentivize you to go and fight difficult content. So the only real difficult content that is somewhat worth it is Uber Lilith, and this is basically about it. For the most part, you always optimize around speed, and you don't want to necessarily fight high-level monsters. Now, of course, you can go enter Torment difficulty, you can get your first Ancestrals a bit earlier, but even so, you don't necessarily speed up your progression, because early on in Torment difficulty, you don't have the hardest monsters anyway, and they just come down later when you actually fight like level 80, 90 or 100 monsters or so. Now, when it comes to Nightmare Dungeon farming, there are some more considerations here. So first of all, I recommend you to go check out our Nightmare Dungeon tier list. We have one for solo XP farming and for glyph leveling, so you can see them here. And you generally want to farm the dungeons that are high up on the list. So there's a bunch of like, S tier dungeons that are just really great XP all around. And then there's A tier that are also still really good. And then B tier is kind of okay. And then those you mostly want to stay away from or just run them when you have like no other options available. But on the other hand, you also have to balance the tier and the affixes a little bit with that consideration. So something like an Uldor's Cave is basically always worth it in my opinion, even if it has really bad affixes, unless it's like something that you just cannot run, like Resource Burn, for example, then yeah, tough luck. But for the most part, I would definitely go into those S tier dungeons, even if they are not optimal. And, you know, then maybe I would consider, yeah, do I want to run some of these here if they have critical resist? Maybe not, maybe yes, depending on how powerful I am at that moment. And then basically the lower you go on the list, the easier the affixes have to be for you. And then it's also important to choose the right tier and the right level of monsters. So previously the strategy was always to farm monsters that are exactly 3 levels higher than you, because this is where you got the maximum bonus of plus 25% bonus XP. And from that point, the experience gained from fighting high level monsters barely scaled up anymore. It still does, because the monster has like a higher base experience value, but you don't gain any other benefits other than that. And this is relatively minor. And lately this has been changed to be 1.5% experience up to 10 times. So up to plus 10 levels, you get 15% bonus XP. So instead of plus 3 levels for 25% XP, you go plus 10 levels for 15% XP. This is a pretty significant nerf, and it makes it so that you generally never want to fight monsters that are above your own level anymore. Because even including this base experience bonus, depending on what level exactly you are, you may get something like a plus 20 to plus 30% bonus XP for fighting monsters plus 10 levels of you. But it's very easy to slow down by more than 20% by fighting these high level monsters. So that depends again a little bit on the build. Some builds are just kind of like slow and powerful by default. Let's say something like, you know, most Necromancer builds or something like Polarized Druid. Those builds can definitely think about fighting higher level monsters more than like same level monsters and trying to go faster. But for example, my experience with the Rogue was, this was absolutely not worth it. And you always want to fight monsters exactly on your own level, because this extra experience is kind of minuscule. And at least on a class like the Rogue, where you have options available to go faster, that was absolutely the play. Like, going high level monsters is not a thing for a lot of builds now. Although this changes a little bit later in the progression. So lately there was this hotfix right after the season launch where higher nightmare tier dungeons have been nerfed, and they have significantly reduced HP and damage scaling now. So you can see this here. So it's very extreme on tier 100, which is the highest tier. There's minus 82% HP and minus 79% damage. So compared to before, they are an absolute joke now, basically. And this also already applies a little bit to leveling 1 to 100. So for example, what I was doing towards the later stages, like let's say level 80, level 85 plus or so, with my Rogue, was that I actually did not care that much anymore about going to the next tier or like trying to fight monsters exactly at my own level. And instead I would much more prioritize exactly the right sigils with decent affixes or with easy affixes that wouldn't slow me down, like crit resist or monster life or monster barrier and these kind of things. So I try to dodge those defensive affixes for monsters that would make the run slower, and started just running any of those sigils that I had, regardless of them being the exactly right tier or not. But starting from tier 35, which means level 89 monsters, you can have this reduced scaling, and it starts very slow. But basically, as you go to higher levels, the differences between tiers become kind of smaller than before. So it's not such a big deal to run like a tier 45 or a tier 48 dungeon, as it is, for example, comparing a tier 1 with a tier 4 dungeon. So when you're just like fresh in nightmare difficulty, running your first nightmare dungeons, you generally want to make sure you have this plus minus 0 monster level, and later on the levels don't matter that much anymore. So that's definitely something worth considering, even at tier 50, which means level 104 monsters. You can see this difference here, minus 20% HP, minus 30% damage. This is already noticeable, and especially very close to 100, when your character is like level 95 plus, it wouldn't be such a bad idea to actually run tiers like, let's say, 52, 56 plus or something like that, so that you have monsters that are actually plus 10 levels of your character. And you can at least get some of this juicy bonus experience here from fighting high level monsters. One important note here is that you generally never want to farm dungeons that have monsters below your character's level. Because if the monsters are below your level, you lose significant amounts of XP. So even for one level, it's minus 10%, and then it's 20, 30, 40, etc. So you very quickly go towards getting basically no experience at all. This also means that once you are above level 75, there is basically no outdoor content anymore that you want to do, besides Hell Tides that still gives you some kind of XP. But outdoor monsters will be underleveled compared to your character, and you will just get no XP, and you lose the Nightmare Dungeon experience bonus on top of that. So you definitely want to stay away from those. So to sum up this whole video in a few sentences, start with Renown. So your first character, you should do as much Renown as possible. Try to get those Paragon points wherever you can. Maybe don't finish it in every single region. You might hit level 50 before you do that, and then finish it on an alt or something like that. But if you're not planning to do any alts, definitely make sure you get everything done. Then start doing Nightmare Dungeons as soon as possible, and kind of stay away from any of the other activities in the endgame. Helltides have become relatively worthless, so are the Whispers, and outdoor content in general is not really something worth farming these days. So we have to wait for some adjustments there. When you enter the next difficulties, always make sure that you don't struggle too hard. So you don't want to do it too early and then just be extremely slow and die all the time when you're like fresh in Nightmare or fresh in Torment. Make sure that you are somewhat powerful enough to deal with the monsters there, and don't slow down by, double the amount of time needed for runs or something like that. If that is the case, go back down to the lower difficulty, grind up another few levels, get an upgrade, and you're going to be better off. And then once you are doing Nightmare Dungeons, always farm monsters that are exactly your own level. Nightmare Dungeons have monsters that are plus 53 levels of the tier of the dungeon in Nightmare difficulty and plus 54 in Torment difficulty. So this means that if you do a tier 1 dungeon, you want to be level 54. If you do a tier 21 dungeon, you want to be level 75. Or somewhere along those lines. It is okay if the monsters are slightly over level to you. You do get a bit more XP, but it's generally not worth fighting high level monsters because they will slow you down. And even slowing down a little bit is already making it less efficient in most scenarios. Although that difference changes a little bit on the higher tiers. So once you're like level 90, level 95 plus with a character, the differences between tiers are not so significant anymore. And it's okay to also go against high level monsters a bit easier. And that also concludes the video. I wish you good luck on your journey. I hope you're having a lot of fun in Season 1. And I'm gonna have a lot more content for you guys coming. So stay tuned. See you guys next time.